Hi, Sean here, one half of Sean and Kiara. We are the co-creators of Lucy in the Sky, a graphic novel for middle grade readers published by First Second. Our second graphic novel, Rhiannon, will be out in October of 2025. If you like the things we do, please consider supporting us by becoming a paying member of our Patreon site for $4 a month. And if you enjoy videos like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it'll help us build this channel. Thank you, and enjoy the video. Hello, and welcome back to Reading Tintin. We're going to take a look at Explorers on the Moon today, which was the 17th volume that Herge produced in his Tintin series. And it's the second of a two-parter, which began with Destination Moon. And this was the third of the big two-parters. The first one was Secret of the Unicorn and Red Rackham's Treasure. And then we had the Seven Crystal Balls and Prisoners of the Sun. And this would then be the third of the big two-part adventures that Herge produced, and the last of them. So these books began serialization in Tintin magazine in 1950, and were wrapped up and then published in book form in 1953. And just a few things to say about these videos as I've been doing them. The idea behind the way that I'm doing these videos is to give them a more unpracticed, I guess, conversational style, unrehearsed, I guess. I do a little bit of research. I check the publication dates and some specific facts that I think I may want to talk about beforehand. And I review some of my books on Tintin and on Herge just to sort of refresh my memory. But I don't work from notes. It's mostly my impressions as I'm looking through the books, giving them to you in the moment. Not a lot of editing. I'll go back and I might fix some things that I don't recover from. But if I stumble over words, oftentimes I'll leave them in there. And the idea is to give it a more in the moment, like I said, a more conversational style. So I hope you enjoy this approach. It's in stark contrast to a lot of the heavily edited and very rapid fire, fast-paced YouTube videos that are out there. So Explorers on the Moon. Again, we have a nice title page, circular drawing there, taken from the story. The footprints on the moon's surface somehow brings to mind this attitude that or this intention that Herge had when he was working on these stories, or when he was creating them, really. He didn't want to do anything that had a fantastical theme to it. He wanted to make these adventures, even though it's science fiction, in the sense that the moon landings hadn't happened yet. These were, I remind you, these came out in the early 50s, and the moon landings didn't happen until more than a decade later. So technically these are science fiction. It's speculative science fiction, but he wanted to keep them based in fact. And this is pretty much in line with most of the Tintin adventures, is you don't find a lot of fantastical elements in the stories. So there are a few exceptions, like the Seven Crystal Balls, for instance, with the magic, the sort of almost the voodoo style magic that the Incas are working on the explorers, with the sticking pins in the wax dolls, and the sickness that overcomes the explorers because of that. And there's a heavy supernatural element in the Seven Crystal Balls, which carries over into the next volume. And again, we'll see the same kind of paranormal theme when we come to Tintin in Tibet, with, you know, the idea of premonitions and things like what we would call remote viewing these days, or telepathy, that type of thing. But aside from that, you don't really get a lot of fantasy in the Tintin adventures. I mean, you could really you could imagine a place like Sildavia or Borduria existing in our world. They would fit right in according to our own historical timeline. They would make sense. And the same was true on this, where there was the potential going to the moon. Human beings hadn't been on the moon yet, and we had a pretty good idea of what they would find there, but still, there was a lot of science fiction that was out in the 1950s, which was very fantastical. And Herge intentionally steered clear of that. So we don't find any space aliens or advanced civilizations, extraterrestrial civilizations, and that sort of thing. It's all very rooted in what might happen. And this went into the research for the drawings as well. The drawings of the science, the research center in Sildavia, the architecture, the machinery, all the equipment, right up to the rocket ship itself, which is, looks nothing like the rockets that we eventually would have sent into space, but has actually a lot more of a sci-fi look to it, but was itself based on the German V-2 rockets from World War II. So we open up here in this volume right where the last one left off. The last one was on kind of a cliffhanger where the rocket had just launched from the research center in Sildavia, and the control center had lost communication with the crew. The crew on board were Captain Haddock, Tintin, Frank Wolf, who was Calculus's assistant, and Professor Calculus, and of course Snowy. So the crew of 4 plus the dog. And as they were launching, as the rocket was ascending towards space, the crew fell out of contact with the center, with the research center back in Sildavia, and so we pick up where we left off, where they're frantically trying to call the moon rocket and trying to get them to respond. And of course, here we suppose we've made a mistake in our calculations. That would be appalling. So there's all this tension. He builds up all this tension, but in very kind of real, scientifically plausible situations. And we see also listening in our villains of the story. This mysterious person that's behind these efforts to try to sabotage the moon mission, and they're or perhaps not sabotage, but to sort of take it over in their own way, and they're just as much on the edge of their seat, listening in on their radio. And we see that they have something at stake in the success of the mission. Actually, by Lucifer, it's a bad blow for us if they're all dead. So Herge would have gone out or sent his assistants out. At this point, he had a whole studio set up to help with the increase in the workload and the increase in the amount of work it took to produce these volumes now. It used to be Herge might be able to handle drawing one of these by himself or with one assistant, and now he had a whole studio helping him with things that, were not his strong points, backgrounds and color, things like that. And normally, they would have gone out to a location. For instance, if the story was set in the Middle East, or on a ship, a tanker, or whatever, they might have gone out to those places and made sketches on location. or at the very least, used photographic reference. Start making preliminary sketches and so forth. And of course, nobody had, there was no rocket like this that existed. Nobody had been to the moon yet. So you can't very well go out and do that kind of location sketching. And there's no photographic reference for these types of things. So they had to figure it out. So for the moon's surface, Herge made use of some artwork that artists had done speculating about the moon's, the look of the moon's surface. And for the rocket itself, he actually had a scale model made of the rocket, which could be taken apart. Each level in the rocket could be removed, and bits of the sides of the rocket, the walls of the rocket could be taken off, so that you could get a look at each compartment or each room inside the rocket from whatever angle you wanted to use. And this was an aid in helping the artists really draw these backgrounds, which are just fabulous. They're meticulously done and consistent too. All the machinery in here, if you take the time to study it, you'll see that it all works. So in the story, Tintin is the first to wake up, and we see, well, actually Snowy is the first to wake up, and he begins licking Tintin, and Tintin awakes and responds to the Earth base. And as they all are now awake, Calculus is now I like that Calculus is always very effusive about his work, and especially this would you know, it's a major accomplishment, so give him a right to brag. He says, 2,500 miles from the Earth. Do you realize what an extraordinary adventure this is for us? It's unbelievable. It makes one's head spin. And Haddock, true to form, his reply is, well, my head's not spinning. Anyway, this whole thing is nothing but hocus pocus and jiggery pokery. You're just acting you're trying to pull my leg again. He almost called him, almost told him that he's acting the goat, which is the thing that Haddock said in the last volume, which set Calculus off on a rage-filled rant, which lasted for many pages. I just got done a little while ago talking about how I don't do much editing, and I'm finding that I'm having to do a lot of editing now on this episode because of a stopwatch that I have in my workspace here that keeps going off. And I can't figure out how to stop it. It's it's very infuriating. So if that continues, expect a lot more cuts to come. You know, it's funny that Haddock is saying all this. He's on the rocket. He's just awakened from the launch, and he still, for some reason, doesn't believe that they might actually be in space. And Calculus is going to take him upstairs to show him that they really are on their way to the moon. When everybody is surprised to see one of the hatches begin to lift up, and a hand lifting it up. Somebody is down there. They cannot believe, well, what? Somebody is stowed away, and of course, it's Thompson and Thompson, because they have to be a part of this story. We would not be able to leave them back on Earth. So their excuse is they come up and they say, well, what happened? Was there an earthquake? And Tintin asked them, what were you doing down there? He said, well, we decided to inspect the rocket before it goes. What's the time? And Calculus says, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. He says, good. And the launch is set for 1:34, so we have plenty of time. And they didn't realize that the launch was set for 1:34 in the AM rather than in the PM. And so they realize that they're on the way to the moon. But this, of course, leaves everybody with a problem now. as Calculus explains, they assessed their oxygen supplies for 4 people, and now they have 6 on board, not counting Snowy. Will the oxygen last out? And this, of course, sends Haddock into a tailspin, berating them. They look so downtrodden here. So he's threatening them. Goodness knows why I don't chuck you overboard without any more ado. But they're all called up by Calculus to come and take a look at the view of the Earth as seen from over 6,000 miles. Haddock sends Thompson and Thompson up to the compartment above, and as he does so, he takes it looks like a huge book, a guide to astronomy, out of a compartment there, and it looks like he's getting ready to do some studying. He says, now let battle commence, to work, and he opens it up, and of course he's smuggled some of his whiskey on board in a false book. And we hear from the moon base that they've just attained a velocity of over 8 miles per second, and they are no longer subject to normal gravitational pull. Meanwhile, Haddock is pouring himself a drink, and with each glass he pours, he gets a little bit more toasted, as he does. His Calculus is showing the Thompsons around the controls. Thompson sits down and puts his cane up against one of these levers, and as he grabs it, he accidentally pulls the lever before Calculus can tell him not to, which shuts off the rocket's engine, thereby also shutting off the fake force of gravity that the velocity of the rocket is giving them. So now they found that their gravity is gone, and Haddock is amazed to see his whiskey form a ball and rise up out of his glass. And of course he's far gone drunk at this point. And he says, a decent whiskey doesn't behave like that. Come back here at once. Whiskey, stop fooling about. Get back in my glass this moment. It's a great sequence. And it's wonderful how Herge can take a gag like this and then just sort of stretch it over a few pages. It's a great panel here of them all sort of floating about, and an unusually large panel as well. And Haddock is actually starting to have a good time flying around like he's a bird, tweet, tweet, until Tintin manages to push the lever and to turn on the engines again, bringing back the gravity, and everybody falls to the floor. Haddock comes down. The ball of whiskey flies or lands right in his face, and we see that the bottle is heading for his head as well, but we don't see that. The Thompsons have not had a good fall either. So everybody straps on their magnetic boots now to keep them locked to the floor just in case that happens again. Now they're approaching an asteroid called Adonis, a dwarf planet, which orbits between Mars and Jupiter. And as Tintin goes down to give Haddock his boots, he finds that Haddock is not there, but there's a note that's been left. Tintin reads the note, and he says he's gone out of his mind. Quick, the professor must see this. But before he can do, there's a ringing, an alarm sounds, and we see Snowy rising up again, so the gravity is once more been turned off. And we find out that for some unknown reason, the outer door is just opened, and the nuclear motor stopped automatically. And Tintin shows Calculus the note that Haddock is left, and it reads, "I'm fed up with your rotten rocket. I'm going home to Marlinspike. Signed, Haddock." He's completely inebriated, has no idea what he's doing, and has decided to leave the rocket. So Tintin volunteers to put on a spacesuit and go out and try to retrieve him. And when he gets there, he sees Haddock adrift in space and getting further and further away with each moment. And Tintin realizes that Haddock is being pulled toward Adonis. He's being pulled into the orbit of the asteroid. And so they have to figure out how to get him before he becomes a satellite of the asteroid Adonis. So Tintin asks Calculus to put up the retractable ladder that runs along the side of the rocket so that he can anchor himself there, and then to start up the rocket and increase the speed gradually until they get close enough to Haddock where he can throw him the line, hopefully. This is a great panel. Just the drawings of the rocket, and it's such a simple form, but this would be a complicated thing to draw, and to draw it to look right, to get it in perspective and all these curves. And they really, every time they show the rocket, they do such a good job of drawing it and making it look accurate. And so when you see a large panel like this, where there's not a whole lot, there's the asteroid, there's the rocket, and then there's all the starry space, it's still such a great image. And in fact, all the shots of the black sky with the little stars add such a great look to this volume. All these nice black spaces here. And you don't get a lot of huge black spaces in Tintin. There's no... Herge does not use shading. It's all line. It's part of the clear line style. And so the any kind of illusion of foreground and background or separation is done through the color. But here you have all these unusual, very strong black spaces. So Tintin manages to pull Haddock in. His plan succeeds, and Haddock is not very happy about it. But this time Tintin gives him a piece of his mind. He's really had it with Haddock. And we don't see Tintin lose his cool too often, but this time he does. And when he gets back in, Haddock he always suffers remorse afterwards at the foolishness he has caused when he's been drinking. He says, "I'm a miserable wretch. I had a drink. It's unpardonable. I'm terribly sorry." And Tintin is always very forgiving. "That's all right. We'll forget it." But just thinking about what it was that he actually did. So, characteristic of these stories, no sooner has one crisis been averted than another one begins. So we get down here to the end of the page, and also, the use of the last panel of the page to make us want to turn the page and see what's happening. These cliffhanger kind of page ends. "Tintin, Tintin, come quickly. It's huge yellow caterpillars." So, are we going to get some space aliens after all, we wonder? But, of course, no. It's something even stranger. And here they come down the hatch. Tintin looks at it. He says, "There's no doubt about it. It's hair." And they climb up to see where all this orange hair is coming from, and they find that it's the Thompsons, who are having another one of their relapses from 2 volumes ago, from the land of black gold, where they took the pills. They ate the pills in the Arabian desert, which causes them to start bubbling at the mouth and growing hair which changes color. They're still having relapses. They're not fully healed from this. And Snowy has gotten a hold of them down here and is playing with them like a puppy. So the only way to deal with it is to get some scissors and to cut their hair until the relapse passes. Another great, look at this. I mean, almost not a full panel, page panel, but, you know, 3/4. And a nice, wonderful drawing of the moon and the tiny rocket on its way. So it seems like another crisis now. An alarm is beeping, and there's a meteorite heading towards them. But Calculus says there's nothing to worry about. The automatic system will steer us clear of it, and so it does. So another crisis averted. More antics with the Thompson's hair. love this panel here. He's checking himself out in the mirror. Now, Haddock has been given the task of styling the Thompsons, which he's continuously frustrated in a different way than he is with Calculus, with the Thompsons' foolishness, the idiocy. And he he says, look, there, that's finished. Look at my hands now, all covered in blisters. Well, what is it? His lordship isn't pleased? What more do you want, a shampoo and a set? Or would you rather put it in curlers? So as they're getting closer to the moon, as they're approaching the moon, now it's time for the rocket to begin its maneuvers, in which it has to turn itself around to be in the right position to set down. So we're treated to an explanation. Calculus gives us a technical explanation of what's going to happen here. For readers who are into this type of thing, this would have been great, but it's, you know, adds a lot of text to a story. It kind of slows it down, these big technical explanations. A nice series of panels, sort of like the stationary camera shooting the rocket going through this motion. And then we get a clue as to what might be coming up here. We hear the villains talking. The boss's assistant is asking him whether he thinks they'll really land on the moon. He says, I'm hoping so, but if they come back, well, that might be another story. And he says, oh, I don't understand. What do you mean? And he says, shh, top secret. You'll see later. There's the radio coming in again. So something is going to happen, we know. They're having a little coffee break here. One of the Thompsons suddenly lashes out at Captain Haddock, making him spill his coffee. And Calculus is wondering, what on earth's the matter? He said, this man has insulted us, and we demand an apology. He said, me? I insulted you? Me? Yes, sir. Did you or did you not say that they need 2 Punch and Judy men on the pier, and we do perfectly for the job? Isn't that insulting us? And of course, they're getting it all wrong as he tries to repeat and rephrase what his colleague has said. Quite right. This man has apologized to us, and we demand an insult. No, you great oaf. You've got it back to front. Oh, you mean we've insulted this man and we owe him an apology? Haddock manages to wiggle out of it, and all the while giving them a fresh apology. All right, I take it back. I take back what I said. They don't need 2 Punch and Judy men on the pier, so you can't have the job. Does that satisfy you? He said, yes, we're satisfied. To be precise, we certainly are. Yes, that's all right. Quite all right. They don't need 2 Punch and Judy men, so we can't have the job. It's simple, isn't it? And then Calculus makes the peace between them, and we have a very touching moment here where they're all holding hands and embracing. Now they've all been instructed to go down to their cots and lie down to prepare for the landing on the surface of the moon, and the Thompsons have slipped into their pajamas. Another great panel here of the moon's surface and all the craters. And more tension. Will they land successfully? Of course we know that they will. Back at the base, they're really sweating it, eating their ties even. They black out again as they get close to being landed, and the last thing they hear is Snowy howling. That was the dog howling for the dead. Then he must have passed out too. This is nice. These are really nice panels as well of the rocket landing. And a great 3/4 panel here of the moon's surface, the rocket, and the Earth. It's a really great arrangement as well. So your eye going from one corner to the other. So of course all is well. Tintin suits up and is going to be the one to first set foot on the moon. He says, "This is it. I've walked a few steps. For the first time in the history of mankind, there is an explorer on the moon." So now Haddock and Snowy and Calculus have all gotten suited up, and we're going to have some antics in the reduced gravity of the moon, discovering that Haddock is discovering that if he walks too fast, he'll find himself being propelled through the air. Of course, Snowy finds this out as well. Golly, now I've taken off like a dragonfly. As they're walking along, they find themselves being pushed slightly by a wave of force. They look around. Of course, they didn't hear anything because there's no air on the moon to cause any noise. But they see that a meteorite has landed right on the spot where they had just walked through a minute or so before. Calculus says, "Well, what do you expect?" And it's an occupational hazard. Haddock, of course, is not happy about this. So now they begin unloading their equipment, their scientific research equipment that they're going to set up on the surface to do whatever work they mean to do while they're on the moon. And as it's being unloaded, they've got a little crane coming out of the side of the rocket. And Tintin looks up, pushes Calculus aside. Something's coming down, and Calculus is just narrowly missed being flattened by a heavy crate. And they see that the wires have parted. Just look there. They must have worn through by friction. It must have been caused by the vibrations to the rocket towards the end of the journey. So Tintin calls up to the captain to make sure to check the wires next time. He says, "I'll make doubly sure." But as he turns around, he sees Wolf is behind him. Wolf seems to be in some sort of state. He says, "Oh, I don't know. I felt dizzy suddenly. I thought I was going to faint. Perhaps it's my heart. It'll go. I feel better already." So you have a little bit of a question. What's going on with Wolf? Was he responsible for those wires being snapped? And then, of course, the Thompsons have to have their turn walking around on the moon in their spacesuits with their clown hair still. They come to a crack, a crevice, not a very big one. And they figure, well, they're going to have to watch their step and jump across it. And he says, for goodness sake, be careful. And they don't realize about the gravity yet. And as he jumps, he lands yards away. And when they realize what they can do, they they set off, holding hands, tra-la-lying across the surface of the moon. And then as they go on, they see footprints. And this sort of brings to mind the episode also from The Land of Black Gold, where they're driving in their Jeep in the desert, and they come across another set of tracks, and so they begin following those tracks, thinking that it'll lead them to an oasis, not realizing that they've just looped around and they've come upon their own tracks. And as they continue going in a circle, they find more and more tracks have joined their road. And so they see their own footsteps. He says, well, footsteps, then there's someone else besides us on the moon. Calculus tells him, well, they're obviously footsteps that are made by one of us. And they reply, well, they can't be made by one of us. There are two sets of footsteps. Quite right. Calculus says, then they're footsteps made by two of us, nitwit. I expect you've gone back on your tracks and that those are your own footmarks. And they realize, have we been going around in circles following our own tracks as in the desert? Definitely not, because there are two sets of tracks, and we're alone. Haddock has had enough listening to their ninnery, and he orders them back. They've only got oxygen for another half an hour anyway. But this question actually stays with Tintin, and he asks Calculus, well, is it possible? Do you think that there are other men on the moon? And Calculus quickly shoots down that idea. So again, Herge raises the possibility that there might be something mysterious or fantastic about to happen, but then dismisses it. So we've got out the moon tank for exploring the surface of the moon, and this was something that required some technical expertise to draw. And at this point, I think Bob Damore was Herge's main assistant at Studios Herge, and they had other people who had specialties in drawing vehicles, planes and trains and so forth. And again, this, the way that vehicles are rendered in these books is always so good. So we have a series of gags here about the starting and the stopping of the tank, and Haddock bumping his head on the glass bubble. Haddock is up above on the tank, and so he has the advantage of seeing further ahead in front than Tintin does, and he manages to see that they're about ready to drive over a cliff, and he realizes that he's trying to tell Tintin to stop, but the microphone on his headset is busted from having bumped against it, and he can't tell Tintin to stop. So nice panel, and also a nice little page end cliffhanger. But they don't go over. Tintin manages to see it just in time. So now they've got helmets on with their communicators set inside the helmets, and this time they have Frank Wolf going with them on another expedition in the tank. And they spot a cave in the side of this cliff face. So they decide to go in exploring. Some really nice cavern drawings here. So they see the stalagmites and the stalactites, and this proves to them that at some point that there was water on the moon for these having been formed. Nice use of, like I said, the use of black is really great here, and especially once they're inside the cavern, giving the sense that this really is a dark place, drawing the figures half in shadow, and then using the color of the beam of light to really give a sense of the darkness. And here as well, the way that he's drawn the the faces and how the bit of their faces is just lit up. A lot of silhouettes. Tintin finds himself going down a chasm and nearing the end of his rope, dropping from it, and then sliding down on some ice. So how is he to get back out of there again? So he decides he's going to try to cut footholds in the ice using a chunk of ice. He manages to string Snowy up on some rope. Snowy is pulled up. And as Haddock lowers the rope down for Tintin again, he's got a longer rope to lower down. Tintin is running out of oxygen. Another little cliffhanger at the end here. The rope has been, which is weighted with a rock, has settled on a ledge. And so it's not coming down to reach Tintin. And will Tintin's oxygen hold out? They're really pushing the capacity of the oxygen using the oxygen that they have. Well, they finally do get him out, and Tintin is on the verge of passing out by the time they get him back to the tank. So now we come to the part of the story where we have the real dramatic tension, and we find out what's going on with Frank Wolf, why he was acting so strange, and what the villain was talking about, what he had in store for Tintin and the rest of the crew. So we have Tintin and Wolf. Wolf says he's going to go down to the storeroom to bring up things for lunch. And as he goes, Tintin is remarking on how strange Wolf has been acting, how he's changed in the recently, how he used to be so smiling and happy, and he's not the same now. Wolf comes back up. He realizes that he didn't bring any tinned milk with him, so he says he's going to have to go back down again. Tintin volunteers to go down. He says, it's my turn to go. And Wolf, who is sweating beads, he says, oh, all right, thank you. It's very kind of you. He's obviously is meant for this to happen. And down Tintin goes, and as he does, Wolf starts fretting. He's going down. It's too late to do anything. Now he's at the bottom. He's going into the hold. What's going to happen? Tintin walks into the hold whistling. He gets whacked over the head with a kosh. And we see that somebody else is stowed away on the rocket. And for readers who had already read King Ottokar's Scepter, we would recognize who this is. It was the aide to the Sildavian king, Colonel Jurgen, who was part of the plot to overthrow the Sildavian monarchy, and was working in league with agents from neighboring Borduria. And so we know he's a hostile player, and we haven't seen him since that volume. And now he's back again, and Tintin was his old nemesis. And he says, aha, my young friend, you never expected that one day Colonel Jurgen would come as far as the moon for his revenge, did you? And so he calls Wolf down. Wolf is horrified. He thinks that maybe he's killed him. He says, don't worry, I've just put him to sleep. And he says, now, Wolf, back we go to Earth. And he says, but what about the others? Without waiting for the others? He says, of course. Tell me, how soon can the rocket be made ready for takeoff? But Wolf is saying, I can't maroon them on the moon. That would condemn them to death. He says, cut out the fine words, my dear Wolf. Cut out the noble sentiments, too. We're leaving, and that's that. But Wolf refuses to do it. But then Jurgen turns to him and says, supposing we wait for the others to come back and overpower them one by one as they leave the airlock, right? And then we set off for the Earth with our prisoners. But the oxygen, what about the oxygen, eh, Wolf? He's forgotten that there's way too many people on board now, including Jurgen and the Thompsons. And their oxygen will not last them for the return trip. And in one more act of thuggery, he knocks out Snowy, who he encounters when he comes up the hatch, and Snowy begins barking. And pushes him with his foot, kicks him down into the hatch below. So this panel here, just this act of shoving the knocked out dog down into the hole. I always thought this panel just so nicely kind of summed up what sort of person, what sort of villain this guy is. So he tells Wolf to fix him a meal and get the rocket ready to go. Wolf says that's impossible. The motor has to be prepared for at least a half an hour. He says, well, hurry. What are you waiting for? And meanwhile, Tintin has gained consciousness again. He's tied up in the hold. And he realized that someone is turning on the motor to the rocket. Just as the others in the tank are now heading back towards the rocket. And as they're doing so, Jurgen and Wolf are getting ready to blast off. And we see the view of the rocket from the tank as they're approaching, and they're horrified and surprised to see the rocket begin to take off. What the devil? The rocket, look, it's going. But then the engines shut off again. The rocket comes back to the ground. Jurgen yells at Wolf, confound it, we're back on the ground, what happened? I don't understand, we began to rise normally, and then the engine simply stopped. There's no reason at all. Jurgen suspects that maybe Wolf is sabotaging their launch, and he threatens him. He pulls out his gun, and he says, listen to me, Wolf, I'll count to 10, and if we're not safely on our way by the time I get to 10, I'll put a bullet through your brain. And we have our end of page cliffhanger with Jurgen counting down, Wolf begging for his mercy. And just as he gets to 10 and is about to pull the trigger, someone throws a wrench, knocking the gun out of his hand, and of course it is Tintin, who's managed to free himself from his ropes. And we find out that it was actually Tintin who shut off the rocket just in time. Now with the others back on board and Wolf and Jurgen tied up, Calculus confronts Wolf, who is ashamed. And we hear Wolf's explanation why he's done what he's done. We get another big long exposition here, but it was due to gambling debts. And to flee his creditors, he came to Europe, to Sildavia, where he began working at the Atomic Research Center, but his creditors caught up with him and began attempting to blackmail him, forcing him to hand over information and secrets from the research center. And then everything begins falling into place. Haddock says, then it was you who nearly stove my head in too when I was lying in wait in the corridor at the center. Well, you'll pay for that, all right. And the Thompsons get in on it as well. And they confront Wolf with their own gripe. They say, well, what about the skeleton, Wolf? Was that you? Yes, skeleton. Were you the wolf? Come on, answer up. And Haddock says, blistering barnacles, this is a serious interrogation. So we get a lot more explanation of backstory here, which we don't really need to go into much here. As Haddock is ranting at Jurgen. Jurgen's response is great. He says, do what you like with me, but please be kind enough to stop spluttering in my face. It's wet. Which really sets Haddock off. What? Me wet? You dare, a man of spirit like me, to hear myself insulted by this creature? Calm down, Captain, calm down. Calm down, but you heard him, this little black beetle daring to make out that I'm wet? You call me wet? What a nerve. And as he turns to the Thompsons, they've got their umbrella out, ready for Captain Haddock spluttering. That's so great. So now preparations are being made for the return voyage. Everyone is ready for the launch back to the Earth. But we have another crisis. It's revealed that the rocket is somehow off course, and they need to correct their course in order to successfully get back to the Earth. And as all of this has happened, we find that Jurgen has escaped and has once now pulled his gun on them. Of course, we've got this situation of not enough oxygen, and so we know that Jurgen is going to have to eliminate some of the people present. He says that you spared my life, but I'm not going to spare yours. And then we have Wolf, in a final moment of bravery, attempts to take wrestle the gun out of Jurgen's hand, and before Tintin can get to him to help, there's a bang. Herge always does this, sort of cuts away, so we don't ever really see the grisly moment, and we see that it's Jurgen who got hit with the bullet. And so we have our villain taken care of, finally. And as they're nearing the end of their journey, everyone is falling asleep. Tintin's giving his last message to the Earth base, and as Wolf sees that the coast is clear, everybody's asleep, now is my chance, and he begins tiptoeing away. We're wondering now, what is he up to? He gets caught by one of the Thompsons. He says, I'm going below to the hold. I think there's another cylinder of oxygen down there. Oh, good. So even with Jurgen eliminated, they're still with this dilemma where there's still too many people in the rocket. There's not enough oxygen. They're wondering if the oxygen will last the whole trip home, and they're going to sleep to try to conserve their oxygen. But even then, they're finding it hard to keep conscience. The Thompson seems to accept that explanation, and Wolf goes down. And they're awakened by the Earth base. They all have to get up to begin their turnaround maneuvers. All of them begin putting on their magnetic boots. They're wondering where Haddock discovers that Wolf is gone. His bunk is empty. And Thompson says, don't worry, I know where he is. He went down to the hold a few minutes ago. As they go down to investigate, they find a note and some wires have been cut. Haddock assumes that he's still up to no good, Wolf is, and that he's sabotaged the rocket. But as they read the note, Tintin says, the poor wretch, this is horrible. And we find out what Wolf has done. It says, by the time you read this, I shall have left the rocket. When I am gone, I hope you'll have enough oxygen to reach Earth alive. Perhaps by some miracle, I shall escape too. Forgive me for the harm I have done you, Wolf. And then a little postscript to open the outer door. Without sounding the alarm and stopping the motors, I had to cut a few wires. You only have to reconnect them, and everything will work properly again. So we have the end of Wolf. And this is something that Herge had a little disagreement with his publisher. They originally he didn't want to put this little bit in about perhaps by some miracle I shall escape. He wanted to be a little bit more final than that, and his publisher pressured him to add this in to give the readers that little bit of hope that maybe Wolf might have escaped somehow. And Tintin realizes that they've got to set the automatic pilot, but he can't get Calculus to wake up yet, so he's got to go and try to do it himself. Tintin staggers up through the hatch, crawls across the floor, trying to get to the controls as the rocket is quickly descending to the Earth. And with one last heroic effort, he manages to get up to the controls and put on the automatic pilot. Just in time. And we have a few really nice panels. Great car there, too, of the rocket coming down to Europe. Really great perspective there, and the train of the Earth. You get a lot here. The rocket, the perspective, the car, the fire trucks, the emergency vehicles. These last few panels of the car sort of driving almost right into the blast underneath the rocket and avoiding it just at the last minute. Sort of makes you wonder, would this really be possible? Wouldn't that car have been incinerated or at least blown away with shockwaves or something? But makes for a really great panel. A couple of panels. And the emergency vehicles come out to the scene. Baxter and his driver wander out of their car. They're looking like they've been nearly incinerated. They've got to cut a hole in the side of the rocket to get them out. They're in a rush to get them out before their oxygen is completely gone, and they're hoping that they won't find them dead inside the rocket. But of course they aren't. They're alive. And as Tintin comes to, he hears some sad news. Your friend, the captain, alas, his condition is far more serious, and I fear... What are you trying to say? Where is he? Well, he's over there on the stretcher. Good heavens. The captain, it's not possible. Captain, it's me, Tintin. Please wake up. We're back home, Captain. Since no sign of life, do you really believe that, alas, his pulse is very irregular and he's very weak? But what can you expect? The man's heart is worn out, but I'm not surprised if what they tell me is true. He seemed that he was a great whiskey drinker. And at the mention of whiskey, this revives Captain Haddock. What? That wasn't a dream. I distinctly heard it. Someone here just mentioned whiskey. A great ending for the story. Captain Haddock's alcoholism providing the final gag. Not quite final, as we have one last pratfall as he trips over a stretcher. As he says, I tell you, I've learned just one thing from all this. Man's proper place is on dear Earth. And we come to the end of our story. Thank you for joining me. And next time, we shall read The Calculus Affair.